So I guess we're going to give this baseball thing a try for today, and we'll play some baseball. A couple of games have been postponed already, but it seems like things are going to soldier on. So let's talk some DFS. Welcome on into the FanDuel Fantasy Live Q&A here for Monday, July 27th. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Here to take a look at today's slate. Again, as mentioned, a couple of games have been postponed already. In case you have been off of Twitter, bless you. That's awesome. Great choices throughout today. The Orioles game against the Marlins has been postponed, and the Yankees game against the Phillies has also been postponed due to COVID-19 concerns. Smart decision there. And we'll see the other games going on, and we'll see what happens there. But for tonight, the big thing to note is that lock is at 6:05 p.m. Eastern on FanDuel for the main slate. So if you want to get your lineups in, make sure they're edited and entered by 6:05 p.m. Eastern to get a couple extra games here available on the slate. As a reminder, this is an interaction-based show, so if you want to have any questions answered about today's slate, check out the FanDuel YouTube page, check out the Twitch page. That's where we'll be pulling most of the questions for today's show. You can always hit us up there. Any questions you may have about your DFS lineups for tonight, players you want to use, players you just want my thoughts on, happy to answer any questions. So make sure you get those in the YouTube chat. As far as tonight goes, the main three pitchers for me are all still in place. From this morning of the solo shot, I mentioned that Joshua James of the Astros is my number one pitcher for cash games and for tournaments. $6,700 for tonight, taking on the Seattle Mariners, and gives you a lot of flexibility with the rest of your roster because that salary is so low for Joshua James. I think that I feel good about the pitch count. Dusty Baker has always proven he is okay with letting his guys go pretty long. James was over 80 pitches in his final tune-up start, so feeling good about him for cash games and for tournaments. Tyler Glasnow is someone I think is a tournament-only option, but a decent one. My concern with Glasnow is that he was late to report for camp, and because he tested positive for COVID-19, hasn't been fully ramped up yet. I'm not sure of his workload. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Walker Buehler. I feel better about Glasnow's workload than I do about Walker Buehler's, but not good enough where I think that Glasnow is a cash game play. He is strictly for tournaments for me for tonight, going James in cash games. I think that Adrian Hauser is a tournament option as well. Question here from Aaron. What are your thoughts on pitching Josh James? Hey, and stacking the Mets. Also, if I do that, do I need to pay up for some hitters? Who are your top 4,000 plus hitters for today's slate? Okay, so just mentioned I like Josh James. You asked that while I was talking about it, so my bad, Aaron, for stepping on your toes there. But let's talk about why I like Josh James. Moving from the rotation or from the bullpen last year into the rotation this year, and my numbers on Josh James here for today are just kind of spitballing what I expect, like a 29% strikeout rate, 11% walk rate, so a lot of walks, but a lot of strikeouts, and he's facing a Mariners team whose active roster had a 26% strikeout rate against righties last year. So that's good for the upside for Josh James. As mentioned, 82 pitches in his final exhibition start. So I think that James, a really good option, Aaron, and someone that I do like a lot for tonight's slate. As far as stacking the Mets goes, they are my favorite stack for today. They're facing Josh Osich is the starter for the Red Sox, but Zach Godley will be the bulk reliever. And Godley, as a starter last year, 5.82 xFIP, 16% strikeout rate, 12% walk rate. Did get ground balls, but also a lot of hard contact. So kind of hit the nail on the head there, Aaron. Those are my top two options for today. As mentioned, that does leave you a lot of salary to spend up with here. I think that you could spend some of that on the Cubs, guys like Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo, not as good against lefties, but definitely someone who is at least in play there. I love Christian Yelich. No Brewers lineup last time that I checked. So we'll check back on them once their lineup is out. But I'm going to assume that Christian Yelich will be in there. He's facing a lefty to start, but it's going to be a situation where Steven Brault starts, and then Chad Kuhl will be piggybacking on him. So some plate appearances for Yelich against righties too. I don't really care about him against lefty on lefty. That's totally fine with me. So I think the big Cubs guys are in play, and I think that Christian Yelich is a good, really expensive option as well. Yevgeny is asking, do you like the Toronto bats over the Boston bats for cash games? I'm not a huge fan of the Toronto bats. I think this is more of a general thing. I think the public may be higher than I am on Toronto in general. When you look at their numbers overall here, this is based on their current active roster. Again, if you are new to MLB DFS or just don't know about this feature on FanGraphs, you can click the active roster tab. That'll show you just players who are currently on the active roster. And if you look at the Blue Jays and their current team, 85 WRC plus against righties, 37% hard hit rate. So a lot of hard contact, but also a lot of strikeouts. And Anibal Sanchez, despite massive imperfections, doesn't allow any hard contact. Last year, his most relevant sample was his final 18 starts, throwing more changeups, 33% hard hit rate. So I'm not really into, you asked about the Nationals. Sorry, Alvin. Oh, no, sorry, that was Evgeny. Okay, yeah. Not super into the Blue Jays bats for tonight, and I think I'm lower on them than the public in general. Alvin is asking, do you like the Nationals bats? So other side of that game. Trent Thornton last year, this was his final 14 starts with fewer sliders. Again, all these numbers on here are kind of, it's just judgment call on my part, where I am taking what I think is the most relevant sample for each pitcher. And the most relevant sample for me for Trent Thornton was his final 14 starts, 20% strikeout rate, kind of similar to Sanchez, where he didn't allow a ton of hard contact, a 35% hard hit rate, and got the link in here so I can just pull this up and quickly see what Thornton did in that time. Thornton didn't stand out to me initially as being a guy I wanted to stack against. But the problem there is that one of my favorite stacks for today was the Yankees, and they have since been taken off the table due to that game being postponed. 4.39 ERA in that time. The batted ball numbers, it's okay with that hard contact rate being lower. So the Nationals, not my favorite, Alvin, I think is the way that I would phrase that. If you're looking for stacks to replace the Yankees-Phillies matchup for tonight, I was trying to look through this before, and I think it would be the Cubs. I had a question here from Riddell. Who was it? Nick was asking about the Cubs bats. I do think the Cubs bats are options as of right now. I would make sure you check out Kevin Roth of Roto Grinders. Check out what his updated weather forecast says for tonight, because there is a lot of rain on the forecast. As of right now, I am inclined to use hitters in that game. Pitchers, probably not. I wouldn't want to use John Lester or Wade Miley to begin with, but I think that you can go hitters here. At least this is my personal opinion as of right now. I check back with what Kevin says later on, but I do think that Cubs would probably be next up on my list. Guys like Bryant, Baez. I think Schwarber's fine against lefties. Looking at him against lefties last year, 44% hard hit rate, 45% fly ball rate. Good number of strikeouts, but hey, it's going to happen for sure. And Wade Miley, not a big strikeout guy to begin with. So I do think the Cubs would be a place that I would turn. Mateo is asking, rain is messing with the Cleveland game and the Reds game. It's going to be hot with a high dew point of 65 degrees in Boston, so balls will fly. You like JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts. I almost said Xander Schauffele. I've had way too much golf on the mind recently. Yeah, Mateo, I think that the Red Sox are a pretty solid option. They're facing Michael Wacha, Waka Flocka flamethrower. Not exactly the case anymore. 19% strikeout rate last year. This was 10 starts at the end of the year after he moved back in the rotation. Not a lot of strikeouts. He is a ground ball guy in general, but 39% hard hit rate. So I agree. The Red Sox are a solid stack for tonight. I prefer the Mets in that same game, but I think that I'd agree with Mateo where the Red Sox are definitely an option as well. Riddell Gregory is asking, any other pitcher you like besides Joshua James? So I mentioned Tyler Glasnow earlier as being someone I will use for tournaments. A little bit of trepidation there for me for cash games because I'm not sure what the pitch count will be. Looking at Glasnow, I think he went like 3 innings in his final tune-up, 49 pitches the time before that because he was a late arrival due to a COVID positive test. But 33% strikeout rate. You're not going to get a lot of guys on the slate that have a number that high, and the Braves are a very good offense, but they will strike out. 25% strikeout rate for the active roster last year against righties. Also really good park for pitching because it's summer. This game is indoors while most others are outside. That means the temperature will be lower. That's better for pitching. So I think that Glasnow, good for tournaments. I would not go there in cash games due to concerns around the workload there. So I would go Glasnow. Another name that I would consider, Riddell, is I don't mind Adrian Hauser. He didn't pitch super deep into games last year, but when he was on the mound, he was really effective. This is over his final 12 starts. He bounced back and forth between the bullpen and the rotation, but once he became a full-time starter for the rest of the year. 3.73 skill interactive ERA, 27% strikeout rate, 7% walk rate, 33% hard hit rate. I still don't know if he's going to be like a guy who ever gets to 100 pitches, but how many guys on this slate will be for tonight? So Adrian Hauser on July 27th is a better option for DFS than Adrian Hauser on August 27th will be, because then his pitch count concern will be more considerable than it is right now, when everyone's going to be a little bit lower. I don't care as much about Hauser being lower. 77 pitches for him in his final tune-up start. So Hauser's facing the Pirates, not a big strikeout team, but also not a big bat team. So I definitely think that I am willing to go there. Hauser is $6,000. James is $6,700. I prefer James because James has the higher strikeout matchup and is the higher strikeout guy in general, but Hauser has a lower salary. He is more proven as a starter because James has always been a reliever. So there are reasons to go with Hauser. So going back to Riddell there, I think if you want options outside of Joshua James, give me Glasnow second and Adrian Hauser third. Cody Smith, what do you think about the Houston game? So the Houston game here, as I search for it. Okay, so Kendall Graveman against Joshua James. Talked about Joshua James before. The reason I'm not stacking the Astros is if you read the exhibition game reports about Kendall Graveman, I know, don't get sucked in by beat writers and by reporting. It's a trap we can all fall to. However, Kendall Graveman apparently has had a lot of heat in those exhibition games. He's always been a big ground ball guy, never a guy who let up a ton of hard contact. So if you give him the possibility to get more strikeouts while keeping or assuming that he's going to continue to get ground balls, that's a little bit concerning for this Astros team. So I think that they are fine, and I think that you can justify stacking the Astros. Personally, I'm inclined to go elsewhere. It's also not a great park for offense because it looks like it's pretty rainy in Houston for today, so I'm assuming that the roof will be closed. That's not a great thing for offense, so I think you can justify the Astros really easily because they're the Astros. It's a slate where we are spending down for pitcher. You can go nuts. You can go with every Astro your heart could possibly desire. But I think that I am okay being a little bit lower on them just because I think that Kendall Graveman is not someone I'm super antsy to stack against right now. Yevgeny is asking, do you ever take roster rates into consideration for cash games? Seems like a lot of chalky guys for tonight. So Yevgeny, I really don't. The reason that I don't is because you're just trying to make the best lineup possible when it comes to a cash game. You don't, I mean, personally, I guess, I don't really care that much about what other players are doing. And the thing about chalky players is that they're often pretty chalky for a reason. If you have reason to be skeptical of a team that you think is going to be very popular in a double up, then go ahead. But I'm not going to exclude a team in a cash game exclusively because I think they will be popular. So personally, I don't. I'm just going to go with the players I think are best for that specific slate. That does include stacking. That does usually include paying up the pitcher. Tonight it doesn't because it's Joshua James. But in general, I'm not super wary of popular players in cash games just because I want to fill out the best lineup possible. And filling out the best lineup possible means I am just going to play things straight and play things how I want to play them. I also tend to think a bit differently than some players just because I have a different process for pitching where I tend to not value matchups as much as others. So that tends to lead me away from some people at times too. So it's generally not a huge concern of mine, but it's a good question whether or not we should consider popularity in cash games. Question over on Facebook from Danny Chappelle. Cincy stack. I think that it's intriguing because John Lester is a big name. People know John Lester. He is one of the highest salaried pitchers on the slate. So I could see a situation where the Reds, nobody goes there because it's John Lester. But Lester last year, this was over his 19 starts where he was throwing fewer curveballs, 4.57 skill interactive ERA, 21% strikeout rate, and a 38% hard hit rate. So those are reasons why you could get interested in this Reds offense. And they have some guys who can hit lefties pretty well. Aristides Aquino, Nicholas Castellanos, Eugenio Suarez. That's not a bad conglomeration of Reds players. The issue that I get concerned about here is that the Reds have lost some firepower. I know it's a lefty out there, so don't care as much about Mike Moustakas there, but having one fewer competent bat in the order is a negative. And you look at this lineup for the Reds, the bottom part of that order isn't very good. And that means it's tougher for me to see them turning the lineup over again and again and again and again and getting additional volume for the guys at the top of the order. So while I think you could, Danny, take a look at some Reds individuals, they're not a team I'm actively looking to stack, just because I think that the overall firepower within the offense with the players who are still outstanding is a little bit disappointing for me. Where do I get that graph from? I'm not sure which graph you are talking about. Are you talking about this is referring to Sam on Facebook. Where do I get that graph from? Not sure which graph you're referring to, so I'm just going to go through a couple of different things here. I'm assuming that you're talking about this. This is just my personal sheet. Again, this is looking at what I think is the most relevant sample for each pitcher. I will go through their pitch mixes, see when they change things. I don't care as much about velocity because there are a lot of factors that lead to velocity, whether it be temperature, whether it be a lot of things that can influence velocity. I care more about pitch mixes. So that's why if you look over at the notes section here, you're going to see, okay, this is what he did when he threw more changeups and stuff like that. So that's why the main focus there is pitch mix. So I'm just looking for pitch mixes to see, when did Anibal Sanchez become the pitcher that he was at the end of last year? That tells me the most relevant sample, trying to get the biggest sample that I can while looking at trying to find the way that I can best represent what I expect out of Anibal Sanchez for tonight. So looking at those relevant samples, I will go through each pitcher on that night's slate and jot down their numbers within that most relevant sample. And those are the numbers I use to formulate my plays for that night and decide which pitchers I want to use as pitchers and which ones I want to stack against, both for cash games and for tournaments. Tim Stone is asking, is Encarnacion a solid play for tonight? All right, he's facing Aaron Savale. Savale last year, I think this was his entire sample, 10 starts in the majors, 20% strikeout rate, 38% hard hit rate allowed. Savale didn't get a lot of strikeouts. And if you look at this White Sox team, they have one pretty major weakness. That weakness is their strikeout rate. So they're always intriguing to me when they're facing a lower strikeout pitcher. So I think that you could talk yourself into getting excited about a team like the White Sox when they are facing a lower strikeout pitcher. Savale doesn't profile as someone who I necessarily want to actively stack against at all times, just because his numbers are not, or at least in the minors, they weren't glaringly awful, I guess is the way that I would say it. Kind of a guy who always outperformed his peripherals throughout the minors. Really good numbers in AAA last year with a 26% strikeout rate, 13% swing and strike rate. So I think you could definitely consider the White Sox, but I do think that, and guys like Encarnacion, but they're not a priority for me. Alvin is asking here, if you don't mind, how would you rank your updated stacks for tonight? Good question, Alvin. I like that question. I think the Mets are still number one. They were number one for me this morning based on the matchup with Josh Osich and Zach Godley. So I'm going to stick with the Mets as my number one stack for tonight. Number two, let me think here. Probably going to go with the Brewers. I don't think the lineup is out yet, which is kind of annoying, but I'm not going to ding them for that by any means, as it should be out here pretty soon. I think I'll go the Brewers number two. They're facing Steven Brault and Chad Kuhl. That's not a great combination if you're trying to look for some really good pitching. So I think the Brewers would be number two for me with that going up against that combination of dudes. And I'd probably go Cubs 3, as long as we get assurance on the weather as being pretty solid for tonight. If we can get guarantees by 5:30 or so that the weather will look pretty good in Cincinnati, I will go with the Cubs 3. I might wind up going with the Red Sox number 4 there. I think that the match with Waka is not all that bad, so definitely at least intrigued by them. So those are the top 4 in order of how I'd rank them. I'd go Mets 1, I'd go Brewers 2, then I would go, what did I say here? I think I said Red Sox 3 potentially. Oh, no, Cubs 3, Red Sox 4. So hopefully that helps there, Alvin, with the numbers. Rob Johnson, thoughts on Detroit stack tonight? Rob, I like the way you're thinking because I considered it. I will put it that way. I did consider going with a Detroit stack as being one of my recommended stacks for tonight. They're facing Mike Montgomery, and Montgomery didn't do so hot as a starter last year. His ERA was actually pretty okay, but as a starter last year, 18% strikeout rate, 48% hard hit rate allowed, and decent temperatures today, Detroit, 84 degrees up there. The reason I decided against going with Detroit is that if I'm using Joshua James as my pitcher for tonight, I don't need a lot of salary savings with Detroit. And that's kind of the big appeal with Detroit, is that they've got all these super cheap hitters. No one here is going to cost you more than $3,000 in that entire lineup. So I think that if you want to go with Tyler Glasnow and you find yourself in a situation where you need some salary savings, I think that I could definitely see myself going towards Detroit. I just don't think I'll be in that situation all that often. And if I am, Rob, if I'm in a situation where I don't need the salary savings, I'm less inclined to go with a sketchy offense. I think we will call Detroit that. I hope that's a fair assessment of their offense. So I'm going to avoid the sketchy offense for tonight. But Rob, if you find yourself in a situation where you want to leave salary on the table, or if you just really just need the savings, if you go Glasnow in an expensive stack, I think Detroit's in play there. So I think I like the thought process there, Rob, and I am on board with it if you are in a situation where you need that. Don is asking, what do you think of Lewis for Seattle tonight? I had Kyle Lewis in a dynasty league for like 3 years. Ever since he got drafted, I've had him in a dynasty league for 3 years. That dynasty league folded this offseason. I have not gotten to use Kyle Lewis, and I'm very sad about it. I think that you could justify it. I won't personally be doing it just because I like Joshua James so much. James, the strikeout rate is so high, and I don't like targeting hitters facing high strikeout pitchers because it's kind of like a math situation here. Let's say Joshua James, let's project him at a 28% strikeout rate for tonight. If Kyle Lewis gets 3 plate appearances against Joshua James, he's expected to put about 2 balls in play. That's not a lot to work with there. That's why I prefer to go with hitters who are facing low strikeout opponents, gets me more balls in play, gets more chances of extra base hits. So the hesitancy around Kyle Lewis is nothing to do with his talent. I love Kyle Lewis. I think he's really fun. It's more about the fact that Josh James is probably going to get a lot of strikeouts, and that is a pretty big turnoff for me. Lamar Hawkins, what about Acuna for tonight? All right, so pulling up the Braves. They're facing Tyler Glasnow. Glasnow, similar thing, as we were talking about Joshua James before, with a lot of strikeouts. Glasnow, not a big walk guy, didn't allow a lot of hard contact last year. Acuna, almost always in play. Probably not a guy, or he's not a guy. I could just say flat. He's not a guy I'm going to use for tonight. Jason Parker is asking favorites from the Mets. Okay, so we'll pull up the Mets lineup here. They have not released their lineup as of yet. Let me double check on that first before speaking in definitives here. La-di-da. Aha, they have their lineup. Okay, so Osich is the opener. He is a lefty. Probably not going to be out there all that long. The problem is that Jeff McNeil is a lefty too, and Jeff McNeil's first plate appearance is going to be against lefties. So that's kind of a bummer. I still like Jeff McNeil a lot. I like Michael Conforto a lot too. So I think they're looking at this Mets lineup, and players I want to use. Pete Alonso is one by a mile. Absolutely the number one guy I want to use for tonight. I'm going to put Michael Conforto number 2, Jeff McNeil number 3, because my baseline assumption is that Osich isn't going to be out there that long. We'll see a lot of Zach Godley, and that's going to favor guys like Conforto and McNeil. So I am still going that way. JD Davis, the JD is short for Just Dongs. Just Dongs Davis, a lot of dingers. Probably will get maybe just 1 plate appearance against the lefty. So that definitely is a downgrade for him based on that. But I'm never going to talk at J.D. Davis. He's awesome. I would still go at J.D. Davis, even though I know he might not even get 1 plate appearance against the lefty. Still someone I am okay with using. So hopefully that answers the question. Pete Alonso 1, Conforto 2, McNeil 3, and I go J.D. Davis number 4 within that Mets stat. That is all the time that we have for today. And once again, want to thank you all for tuning in. We are back again tomorrow with the solo shot. That'll be live on the FanDuel YouTube page at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. We will also be back here again in the afternoon at 4 p.m. on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, etc., all the places that I cannot remember. Make sure you check us out there. The podcast is on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed if you want to check that out. PGA podcast tomorrow too. NASCAR podcast coming later this week. So a lot of good stuff coming up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for on the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Hopefully you all are being safe out there. hopefully we get a lot more baseball left this summer, and hopefully we can do so in a safe manner where we are not getting players sick. Hopefully they can power on through this, and we can keep on playing baseball for the rest of the summer, but we'll definitely enjoy it while it lasts. Good luck tonight. Talk to you all again tomorrow. This has been the FanDuel Fantasy Live Q&A right here on the FanDuel streaming services.